The following presentation was recorded live for the 18th Annual Convention of CALLERLAB. We take you live to the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, where our session is just getting underway.
I'm Red Bates, and I'm glad to see you all here. We had originally another member on this panel, Kip Garvey, but he could not be here at this convention for business reasons. So we're going to handle it with what we have left. Yeah. Anyhow, this panel, in case you're in the wrong place, right church or wrong pew, is on degree of difficulty, or perhaps to explore what makes the calling more difficult for the dancer, so forth, and how you can control this, of course, so that you can adopt your calling to fit the needs of the particular group you're working for. As you know, that can vary. If you work in a retirement community, then you have to change your pace, as I found out moving to Florida. It's a little different than calling. You're right. I started to talk a little slower and say, give them a little more time at places. But anyway, we have two distinguished members to my left here, and my further left, John Sybalsky from Oakland, California. He's been calling for a long time, from around 1972, 3, in that neighborhood, I think. He calls beginners right up through challenge level. Is on staff of the American Challenge Convention. He's been an active member of CALLERLAB for many years, and he's been on a Mainstream Definitions and Formations Committee, now chairman of Research and Development Committee, active in the Advanced and Challenge Committees. He's a graduate of MIT, currently a research consultant at Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, I believe. Is that correct? And he is co-author, along with Bill Davis, of the Big Five and other publications. And seated next to him, I'm sure you all know Mike Seastrom. He's from Northridge, California, calling since 1963, member of CALLERLAB since 1977, and he's been chairman of several committees, Plus Committee, I believe, Program Coordinating Committee. It's been changed now to the Board of Governors Policy Committee, but that's what it was originally. He's been a member of the Board of Governors and been on the Executive Committee of CALLERLAB. He records for Rhythm Records, and he's married and has two sons. Gail is, I don't know if Gail is here or not, but Gail is his wife. During his spare time, when he's not active calling, he's got a little dental business going on. Takes care of your teeth. So if you got any problems about that, why, you see him. Anyway, we're going to get to those two fellows in just a minute. Before we do, just a few comments myself. If most of you have been calling a long time, probably a lot of you know a lot more about this than I do, but there are several items. I don't know if everybody got all the handouts or not, but anyway, we'll try to duplicate what was on those handouts as much as possible on the tape so that you can get that tape and have that information. A while back, we came up with some areas which were listed, I believe, in a couple of publications at one time. I want to go over these. There were 10 items, 10 areas that make calling difficult or harder for the dancers, if you will. And yes, we got about all the volume we can get. I'll try to. Is that better? Okay. Primarily, as you all know, a familiar call, one that's called a lot, is a lot easier for the dancers than a call on the list that's used infrequently, such as maybe at the at the mainstream level, a fan the top. Because not all areas use it a lot. If you're a traveling caller and you go in the area and you call fan the top, you have to be a little careful, you know, just how you use it. You can set it up very easily with the girls in the middle, and of course the girls will probably do the fan the top pretty nicely. They'll do the three-quarter turn, the boys move up. But if you reverse that, you add a little more difficulty to the situation just by switching it and do a swing through first out of your wave, and then you put the responsibility on the boys to do the three-quarter turn and so forth. So that just adds a little bit more challenge. And then, of course, if you want to do it with mixed waves, then you got another little added challenge, making it a little more difficult. But basically, the problem there is that the call is not used. There's not familiar. So the dancer doesn't react to it. After you do calls for a long time, there's a certain body memory that happens. The body goes automatically into the call almost. And that reaction is not there on a call that you don't know very well. So I always tell my dancers, you got a new call, and I say, you know, when you've done this call as many times as you've done a square through, then you'll know it just as well and you'll be comfortable with it. So, you know, don't throw it down the tubes just because you had a workshop on a call and you did it 2 or 3 times and it didn't feel too comfortable. Another thing that makes things a little more difficult is the formation. If you take common formation, we have the term standard formations. I never was too clear in my feeble brain as to just what standard formations were and, as opposed to. But there are certain formations you all know that when you dance them from those formations, the dancers are successful. If you change that formation just a little bit, taking it out of the familiar, putting it into a formation which is just a little bit off, you make things a little bit harder for the dancers because they have to adjust to that situation. Perhaps an example would be if you take a normal 2 parallel ocean waves, right, and do a swing through. No problem, because everybody does it. And if you do a swing through boys run, they do the run before you get through saying it in most cases, so you better say it, otherwise you got a problem there. But if you put them in a tidal wave situation and do a swing through, you might have some other problems, because just changing that formation makes it a little more difficult for some people. Now, in the previous session that we just finished in this room, we had some dancing examples, and I was sitting just watching that whole thing, thinking to myself that they were going through these things that they were doing very, very nicely, but they were callers and their wives, experienced dancers, I assume. Anyway, as they changed the routines a little bit, even these experienced dancers had some slight hesitations. And here's people that have probably been dancing a long time. Anyway, just changing that formation can make for a little more difficult material. And of course, if you've got a real hotshot group, then you just, you work on that, right? And you just have a good time. Another thing that makes it adds to the confusion of things is an unfamiliar arrangement of the dancers. By that I mean if you're in an ocean wave setup, for instance, and it's a normal boy-girl relationship, what we call standard, no difficulty. But if you have box 1-4, that dates me, doesn't it? Huh? 0 box, okay, touch a quarter, your wave forms the other direction, doesn't it? That adds right there some difficulty. Now, I'm not talking about major difficulty. I'm not out to stump the dancers. I'm out to add some variety, a little more interest. So if you do a touch a quarter, you've established the wave the other direction. And just that little change can be enough in some places to add some variety to your dancing. Now change the arrangement of the dancers in those lines and get 2 boys together, 2 girls together. You've added something else. You've added a little bit more difficulty to the situation. And again, that kind of ties in with the other one, we talked about earlier, the being familiar with these things, being comfortable with them, having danced them. And one of our big problems, of course, is that callers, in many cases, in order to survive, don't call a lot of these figures very much. So when they are called, the dancer has really got to think. Because I heard that, last year I heard that one, that was a long time ago. Anyway, remembering too much. Really stacking those calls, so that you're doing one, remembering the next one is already called. Eliminating forward and backs. One call right into the next one. Makes for great dancing, if you got a good group. Makes everything just, zips along. But it also adds to the difficulty. Sometimes callers use a gimmick, and having them, remember a couple of calls and then have the boys do them and then the girls do them without telling them it's just to do what the boys did or something like that. This kind of thing or gimmick. Or you all use the gimmick one now, one later. So they got to remember that you did a scoot back here, right? And then the next dance you call from, no, not the next dance. That's really tough. But, yeah, that's really adding insult to injury. But you know what I mean. You can have fun with that thing to a point, and it does add a little challenge for the dancer to remember that, okay, that one later call was a scoot back, Well, you can add to that just by having him do multiple calls. You can have, add to the scoot back, follow your neighbor and spread, right? And then they got to remember the scoot back. You got the picture anyway. Anticipation. Sometimes you use that as a gimmicky kind of thing. You set them up, and then don't do the call that they expect. I'm not too happy. I think those things should be used very rarely as a kind of a fun thing, and don't overdo it. I've danced with some callers who gimmick me all night long, and I'm pretty sick of it after a little bit. I like it once in a while because it's kind of adds to the the variety maybe, but I think you got to be very careful how you gimmick them too much. A lot of people don't appreciate it, and you may have 2 or 3 squares of your friends that are having a great ball, but down in the back you don't notice that at 10 o'clock the 3 squares walked out the door and didn't come back to your dance. And that makes for not a very smooth dance either. And of course, if you then want to get really tough, you compound the whole situation by combining these things. You give them an unfamiliar formation, and you rearrange the arrangement of the people, and you really go. And if you got a hotshot group, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. Give them a good time. But you have to be able to control that, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, I'm going to turn the microphone over here to my good friend John, and you're on.
Thank you. People square dance for fun, right? But square dancing is an amazingly complicated activity. If you step back a second and look at all the hundreds of things that you're keeping track of without knowing it, if you had to keep track of that intentionally, you'd go crazy. How do we reconcile the two of those? Turns out your brain does a lot of making things simple for you, but there are limits to what it can do. And if you cater to those limits, calling is going to be easy. Start pushing those limits, people are going to start having trouble. And if you walk off the edge of those limits, squares are going to walk out because they're not going to be able to do it. What I'm going to do is give you a quick tour of your brain, look at what some of the limits are and what they mean in terms of calling and teaching people. And the reason I'm going to use the teaching people part of it is the place that you can see the most clearly where people are hitting the edge of what they can do is with beginners who don't know anything. So where it's all new, it's real easy to be probing that. If you have the What Makes Dancing Hard and Easy handout, I'm going to be working principally from that one. The second page of that is an outline picture of a head with some stuff inside it. Let's start with the tour there. You've got your hearing, touch, sight, sense of smell if somebody forgot his deodorant. All of that feeds in to you if you're dancing. You listen to the calls, you drag back the definition of what you're supposed to do, and then you do it. The way the brain is organized, not physically, but sort of organizationally, everything comes in through short-term memory. It's just a place where you can retain something for a couple of seconds. Things like call definitions are in long-term memory, and you just dredge them back as you need them. It comes into short-term memory for a second, goes off to the decision center, which is where things really happen, and then you start to move. Okay. Each of those pieces of the brain has some limits that go along with it. Let's start with the center mediating guy, the short-term memory. What I'm going to do, just to illustrate this, is I'm going to read a series of numbers off. And by show of hands, after I read each set of numbers, I want to know how many people could feed the numbers back to me. I'm not really going to ask you to do it, but let's just see how many could remember. So we'll start with a short one, 436. How many people could? All right, it's essentially everybody, right? 73483. Still almost everybody. 9465372. Yeah, we dropped to about 50%. 803175298. Yeah. Okay, it turns out that you were doing that with your short-term memory. And that last one we got maybe half a dozen people could remember. On average, you can keep about 5 things in the air at once. Now, if you're calling and you start feeding the dancers instructions that they've got to remember, and you go beyond about 3 or 4 that they've got to keep going, they're going to start losing stuff. Because short-term memory is also where the definitions are coming back, where they're keeping track of where they are on Relay the Deucey. All of that stuff is going through there. Long-term memory is not limited so much by capacity, because God knows everybody remembers what the capital of Massachusetts is, right? Springfield, right? Oh, well. It's limited more by how fast you can bring things back. You can drag stuff out of your long-term memory about twice a second. Now, for normal dancing, that's typically plenty because the caller is giving you a couple of beats ahead if he's calling stuff with the right timing. And that in that half second or 1 beat that you've got, you can drag the definition back and keep going. Then there's the decision maker. It normally clicks along at about 5 things per second, and you're not aware of it clicking, because things like where you put your foot next as you walk happen pretty automatically. We'll see some things that hit the limit of that. Now I'd like to do a quick exercise just to illustrate what's going on here. I don't know how many of you can make it out into the aisle, but what I'd like to do is get people in a circle with the yellow sheet that says, please don't turn this over till I tell you to, in hand, if somebody wants to try this exercise. It'll start showing you what the limits of your brains can do. Just get up, get out in the aisle, and make a circle such that you'd be walking promenade direction. That is, if you can remember which way that is around the hall, especially the retired ones, right? Right. Okay. And what I'd like, boy, not many volunteers. What I'd like you to do is start walking in a circle just around this group of chairs here. Just start walking, yep, around that. And as you do it, read the top piece of the sheet, not out loud, just read it to yourself. And you notice you're not having a whole lot of trouble, are you? It just kind of works along. Okay, now, stop for a second. And now it's going to get more interesting. Turn around. You're going to walk backwards. Okay, start walking backwards. No, surely I don't just. Suddenly you're a lot more aware of what you're doing to walk, right? There's all these little things. Now turn the sheet of paper over. Keep reading. You can read the first paragraph. It's going to take a while. Don't kill anybody as you walk backwards. And when you get to the second paragraph where all the words in the sentence are backwards, you have a heck of a time keeping track of what's going on. Okay? Now, you noticed as things got progressively harder, you were paying more and more attention to what was going on and what you were doing, and things were starting to go away, and you forgot where you were in the sentence, and you didn't put your foot down right. You're hitting the limits of what you can do. Thank you. Now, thank all these kind volunteers who humiliated themselves. Turns out the brain's got a lot of coping mechanisms for making all of this stuff easier. When you were 2 or 3 years old, walking forward would have been a hard thing to do because you hadn't done it very much. But the more you do it, the more automatic it gets. Let's look at each of the pieces of the brain. Short-term memory, the way you cope with remembering lots of things, is you group related pieces together into chunks. For you, the call right and left through is one chunk. You heard right and left through as almost one word, as one thing to you. And when you pull the definition back, you're not thinking about the pieces, you just do it. It's one item. To illustrate that, I've got another long number for you to remember. And let's see again by show of hands how many can remember this one. 212-555-1212. Right? It was obviously the area code and then the information number. And you knew that, and suddenly it was one thing that you could remember. And the more you see things like that, the easier they get. The other thing that short-term memory uses is what I call lazy learning. If you teach people to do fan the top, you can teach it till you're blue in the face from all the positions, but if all you ever do it from is right-hand waves with the men on the ends, 2 weeks, that's all they're going to remember. Because the brain's constantly simplifying to remember only what it needs, to have only what it's got to bring back to do with. So if you want people to be able to do it from left-hand waves, men in the center, you've got to do that regularly. The other thing people use are clues. They use hand touches to figure out where to go. And they'll use hand touches as almost part of the definition of the call. So if you've got a wave and call fan the top, the centers are going to go because they've got the hand touch. Long-term memory, mostly you're up against how much you've got in there and how do you get things back out fast enough if they're unfamiliar or if you've learned a lot. People retrieve things really 2 ways. For square dancing purposes mostly, it's retrieval by sound. So to say square through, somebody goes in, drags out what's associated with square through, and sticks out his right hand and starts going. If you're teaching a class and you teach square through, right and left through, pass through, and star through on the same night, apart from the fact that they're hard calls, people are going to start doing one instead of the other because they all have this through in them, and they go dragging in fast for the call name, and what comes out is the thing that was on top, which may not have been right. So you've got to, again, spacing of teaching of calls. Some people also retrieve things by kind of what they meant. I'll use one example from the caller's standpoint. I'm calling along, and I want a call that's going to make me go over there and turn around. Now, you need to know that I'm on the end of the wave, and let's see. So I got to go walk forward in this semicircle, and I'm going to take somebody with me, and who's got the call at this point? It's recycle. Right? You went in by what I meant and dragged out, sort of the other way around. Where you see people doing the same kind of thing is on spin chain the gears and spin chain and exchange the gears. They're so close in meaning that you go for one and you'll get the other one by accident. They're also close in name, which is part of the problem. But if they were close in name and different in action, they'd be easier to keep straight. Place where you see most of the limit happening is in the decision maker. When you're keeping lots of chunks floating in the air when you're a beginner, things are coming along faster than you can really do them. Now, as you chunk things, the decision maker has to deal only with the one chunk instead of the 6 original little things. So the right and left through, instead of being, now let's see, stick out my right hand and pull by, remember to let go. Stick out my left hand and pull my right arm around the lady's waist. Now I got to walk backwards and do this, becomes one action. Lazy learning, again, fits in here. If you've learned something by rote, like fan the top, it's going to be easy. You're in facing lines. I call fan the top. Guys, you're going to walk which way? Forward and to the right, right? Well, I left out one small fact, which is that they were half sashayed lines. But you're still going to walk forward and to the right 8 times out of 10, because that's what you've learned. The decision maker doesn't step in and do anything with it. The decision maker also uses clues to reduce what you've got to figure out. People use the hand that you're holding as a clue to where to go next. If the caller is calling smoothly, you're walking in the right direction already. You keep moving, and that gives you another beat or two to figure out what's going on, or to remember, or to let somebody help you. People on trade the wave, which is a hard call. You take a peek or you point, right? That gets the place you're going into mind, and you go there. Let's take a look at another real hard call on the plus list. Remake the thar. You ever notice that people have a heck of a time finding the second hand? What's going on is, as you've done the initial arm turn, your attention is focused toward the hand that you're holding with somebody, not outward, which is where it's got to be if you're going to find that person. You can use this to your advantage if you're trying to make things hard. Touch a quarter, fan the top from 8 chain through formation. Is hard because, again, your attention is focused toward the touch a quarter hand. Or you can make it easy. Touch a quarter, scoot back. Your attention's focused in the right direction already, and that's another thing that will keep it easy. It's time pressure. Things are coming fast. Wouldn't it be nice if you could know ahead of time what was going to go on? People can fill in words. You build up, almost like with English grammar, you build up a grammar of square dancing. To use an English example, I'm going to leave out of this sentence, and you can probably figure out what it was. Right? You filled in the word. Similarly, for people who were dancing in the late 70s, half tag, trade, and... Well, actually, it was scoot back. How about swing through, spin the top, recycle? Okay, again, you can play to what people know it's going to be, and they'll do it right, or you can play against it if you want to be challenging. As you call, you're calling so that people know a beat or two ahead of time what's coming. And as the call ends and things go out of short-term memory because the call is over, things are starting to come in to deal with the next call. Similarly, relay the deucey, you're overlapping what do I do next with the actual performance of walking forward or doing the arm turns down the wave. Things overlap. If you get a call that's really complicated and unfamiliar, keeping track of what you're doing now is going to take so much short-term memory, as beginners with relay the deucey have this problem, that you can't remember what comes next. You forget that you've got to step up and join the end of the wave, and you just kind of keep on walking past it because you're walking. The final thing that people do is what I call load sharing. You don't see this a whole lot at Plus, though I try to teach it. You see it mainly at Challenge, where people have so much to remember, nobody can do it perfectly all the time. There are going to be some people waiting on the outside for the next call or waiting for you to extend to them or something. It's their job to remember what comes next. In effect, you're giving them some of the responsibility for what goes on. They take your short-term memory load. What happens is you start to exceed the limits. Well, you saw with short-term memory, things just started to drop. To take a real practical example, you're teaching beginners right and left through. Where's the place they have the most difficulty? It's the courtesy turn, right? And it's the guy who has the trouble, right? And the reason ought to be obvious from that little example we tried earlier. He's got to walk backwards. Suddenly he's got to be aware of where his feet are, and the fact that you told him to stick out his left hand and put his right arm around the lady got lost, and probably he forgets to readjust his handhold at the end of it because he's still busy recovering. The other thing you see when you're teaching beginners, and I've just called a right and left through, if you call the next call ahead as you normally would, it's gone. They didn't hear it. They're too busy finishing the courtesy turn. This is the first 4 or 5 times you do the right and left through. Then, as you do it more frequently, it gets smoother, and you can start to call ahead so that things wind up being more smooth because all of that has chunked and people can move on. Now this then gives us a lesson for teaching. Courtesy turn, which is the hard part, you can teach as a separate thing, and if you teach it ahead of time by, say, a week, it's something that has become one unit. Then when you teach right and left through as right pull by and courtesy turn, it's only 2 things to remember, and it comes quickly. You can play the same kind of game. If you think about the call definitions, you'll see places you can take advantage of that. Long-term memory, you start to see, if you teach right on left through, start through, pass through, dive through, all in one week, you see interference. One call starts to come back instead of the other call. So you've got to carefully move the calls that you teach so that they don't interfere with each other. If you're calling C2, there's percolate from the C1 list, there's perk up from the C2 list, and 3 times out of 10, somebody will do the wrong one because they sound the same, because he learned C2 too quickly after he learned C1. And undoubtedly, there are examples at plus. What do I got here? If you exceed how fast people can make decisions, again, you see pieces drop out of the call. They'll forget to do something. Now, once things start to go wrong, once you've started to push the limits and exceed them for some people, because some people's short-term memory is 5 and some people's short-term memory is 9 things, stuff starts to die, things go wrong, people start to panic, and they try to put it back together again. As you start to feel uncomfortable, little things start going on in your brain that says, this feels wrong, or this feels right, so it's probably right. And when you get to a place where something has clearly gone wrong and you're trying to fix it, you'll stop, you'll try to make it feel right again. We have a left-hand wave, and I'm going to call recycle. Should I call it from a left-hand wave with the men on the ends or the men in the center? I hear one ends and a bunch of centers. Why should I call it with the men in the center? It's going to wind up in normal couples. As soon as you call recycle from a left-hand wave, there's going to be panic, and everybody's going to go for normal couple as the right thing to end in. And if that's the wrong answer, you're going to wind up with normal couples anyhow. So you may as well play to it, right? There are 2 kinds of critics that go on. One is, it feels right. It's a normal position, like the normal couples one was. The other one is, it's the normal way to do the action. There are 2 ways to trade, right? There's partner trade and there's an arm turn kind of trade. And if you're doing chain reaction at advanced from one of the odd spots, it's going to require a partner trade, and 8 times out of 10, people will force it to be an arm turn, and people will wind up doing the wrong thing. Again, you can play to that, or you can use it as a thing to make things more difficult. Now, let's kind of look at what happens as somebody does a call, keeping all of this in mind. First, you got to hear the caller. So the sounds come in, and if it's a noisy hall, you're busy trying to patch together pieces of what you heard to try to make a call name that you recognize. And if it's really noisy and you're really concentrating on that, you're going to lose the piece of the last call you were doing, and you're going to break down. This is why noisy halls are hard. So you've heard the call, and you recognize it as a call because it's become one chunk, rather than sounding like somebody speaking French at high speed and you can't understand me, can't tell where the words start and end. Then you get the definition. If you're doing something like trade the wave, you find out who you're working with, and you start doing your pieces, and they come back in order. For long calls like relay the deucey, This whole thing happens a couple of times as you find the new people to work with and the new place to stop. How does this all affect what people should be doing while they're calling? If you want to make what you're calling easy, cater to the limits. Keep things short. Keep words in the familiar order so that people can chunk them and recognize them. Keep things from familiar formations. All the obvious stuff. If you're trying to make it hard, push just one of the limits a little bit. And people will stand up and take notice, but since it's within what they can do, they'll succeed. You want to make it impossible? Make the call 15 words long, deliver it all at once, do it from somewhere they don't know, someplace they can't find who to work with, and down they go. If you're calling hard stuff and you want people to succeed, soothe the critics. You know, play to these, it's got to be an arm turn. It's got to be normal couples. People will succeed. Finally, teach and call to take advantage of the fact that people chunk. Teach so that people build the chunks and then later use them. And everything will work. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. And now turn the mic over to Mike. And he's going to hit it from a little more practical aspect. Okay, you had the theory, and here's the practical. Mike.
Thank you, Ed. I think most of you are familiar with this idea of degree of difficulty. You know that it affects, as we teach a call, you think of what formation can I teach this call, whether it's a quarterly selection or a new call. What formation or what arrangement can I teach this call that would make me successful in teaching it? Also, when you're the process of learning the call, as a dancer, you know that when the dancer is learning this call, they have to repeat the call several times or a great number of times to actually learn the call. So as you're exposing them to this repeated process, their learning process, you have to consider the degree of difficulty. So teaching and learning are also something that you need to think about when you think of this degree of difficulty. Also, when you're programming a call into your natural program or into a particular theme tip, you want to consider the degree of difficulty, and all of these things you need to consider before you even step up to the mic. So I think when we talk about difficulty, it's something that needs to be thought of before you get up on the mic. One of the things that I had in the handout back there was why dancers have difficulty with some of the calls. This ties in a little bit with the session this morning. It also ties in a little bit with what John has just said and Red had said. Basically, what we looked at is why dancers have trouble with calls and routines. One of the things that's really obvious is just incomplete communication. If your commands are not clear, the enunciation is not there, the accentuation of the particular call is not there, the dancers have a hard time perceiving it. It was interesting when I went to Scandinavia back in middle 1980s, and we had a group of callers, and I was doing a caller session. And they asked me if there was one recommendation I could give them that they came to the United States as a caller, what would that be? And I said, the one thing that I see when I am here in Sweden, nobody ever opens their mouth when they talk. Everybody talks like this, and they hardly ever move their lips. And I said, one of the things that you could do that would help you tremendously is open your mouth and accentuate the movements. I think most of you are familiar with this, particularly when you're working with a sequence that really you have to make it clear to the dancer what you're saying. You have to open your mouth and enunciate. The other thing is accentuation. Raising your voice level, as was discussed, I think, by Jack O'Leary in the last session. Raise your voice, accentuate something. Girls lead, flutter wheel. Take a little peek and change that. If you had the head two couples do a left square through, you may lose some dancers because you didn't accentuate head two couples do a left square through. So make sure that you use accentuation in your voice and in your calls to bring out the dancer, bring out the attention or grab the attention of the dancer for their success. Also, sound problems, as we were talking about in a hall where the sound is difficult, you're going to have a hard time getting your message across. And many of you have called in halls where you know you have a limit on the type of choreography you can do because there's only so much the dancers can hear. And because there's echoing, because there's a lot of dancer noise, you have to limit the degree of difficulty. Other things, distraction, other types of distractions. I'm sure you've all called and all of a sudden you got a squirrel over here, somebody's lost their contact lens, and the squirrel over here is looking at them, and squirrel back there is, and pretty soon the whole thing falls apart in a regional area. We recently had one gal that they were all looking on the floor, and I kept saying, well, hold it, we'll get the contact lens, and she didn't lose her contact lens at all. She lost her gum. And they looked around all over the place for this piece. It ended up it was on some other gal's dress. Well, they did find the gum and resolved that. And the next dance, we took a little piece of gum and tied a little string to it and presented it to her so that she could tie the string on herself, and if she lost her gum, it wouldn't fall off her person. So things like that, distraction, dancer distractions, those things happen, and sometimes they're very funny, and sometimes you can have a lot of fun with them. The other thing that I feel really strongly about in choreography, and in patter calls as well as singing calls, is sometimes your selection of music is so critical when you are calling material that is unfamiliar, or whether you are teaching, to emphasize the type of calling you're doing. I'll put on a couple different records here, and I'll read them off for the tape. This one's KC Buddy on Royal. Let's see if we can get this working right here. I use this patter call a lot to open an evening with. It's simple. It's got a good beat. It allows those dancers to hear your voice and get clear. There's not a tremendous amount of instrumentation in this call. It can also be a good patter record to present material. KC Buddy on Royal. Another record that's good for opening up an evening and possibly presenting a little bit of material would be Circle Rhythm on Rhythm Records. Real simple, got a good standard beat. Tells the dancers when to put their feet down, but they can still hear your voice. A lot of the instruments in this particular record are not interfering with the frequency of your voice. I think it'll depend upon the type of voice you have. You have to consider what instruments interfere with your voice. I've got one back in here. That one was Circle Rhythm on Rhythm Records. I've got one back here. I'll never understand why the name of this record is G-string. On ESP. I wasn't there. Sometimes you can get a particular thing like this, and that fiddle will be just bouncing on your dancers. And that fiddle, you kind of want to listen to that fiddle as you're dancing that record. So sometimes what's helpful to do is when you need to have them hear you, EQ that thing, take your treble out of there a little bit. Just take your treble out. It makes your voice a little clearer. You can always use your volume control also to tone down the record, but tone down that fiddle a little bit to draw the dancer's attention to your voice. You got that thing up like that, it's a little bit hard, and sometimes when your volume's up at the same time, your music becomes a distraction. When this record first came out, I ordered it from the record supplier close to my house, and it was on back order. She also happens to be a patient of mine, and when she came in, before she came in, she called in and she told my receptionist to tell me that she was bringing in my G-string. And my receptionist came into the operatory and said, Dr. Seastrom, Millie is bringing in your G-string. And this patient was not a square dancer, and of course I said, well, it's a square dance record, and she didn't believe it. Needless to say, we're in the process of figuring out how to get even for that one. Here's an old record that I think a lot of you have used over the years for teaching your dancers how to put their feet down. It's called Hot Breaks on hi-hat. But a lot of times you can use some real interesting choreography once the dancers have a feel for this piece of music. It's neat for letting the dancers hear their feet too also. It adds a few records, or adds a few instruments as you go along. But it's a good record for allowing your dancers to hear what you're talking about. Hot Breaks on hi-hat. Another record that I use sometimes for, just because it's got a little bit different type of music, is a piece of music on Windsor called Gypsy Feet. Some of you probably use this piece of music too. Once again, it doesn't interfere with your voice a lot. You can call it just a little bit different, and the dancers just move automatically, and then you've got their attention. And you can vary your choreography or change your choreography just a little bit by using a piece of music like this. It's real easy to use a singing call for patters. I'm sure many of you do. Gypsy Feet on Windsor was that last one. Yeah. ESP, Me and My Shadow. dancers to a piece of music like this, you're not going to want to call an awful lot if you can help it. Prompt them a little bit. The degree of difficulty falls a little bit or changes, but it's an awful lot of variety. And you can use that piece of music, and it adds variety. You don't have to add complexity of choreography to add variety. Use your music to do this for you. Now, there's some pieces in this record where it can calm right down. The record calms right down. You don't have any string instrumentation, and you can call what you need to do. But when you get that the strings back in there, you have to really quiet it down. That's called Me and My Shadow on ESP. Another record, I just love this piece of music, but I finally gave up calling patter calls to it. Use it for a contra, as a matter of fact. Arkansas Traveler on Lamar Records. What a great piece of music. This piece of music is hard to call it. Dancers just get into that beat, they're just dancing up a storm. And if you're roaring and you're calling for some pretty simple choreography, you can turn it down a little bit and roar it up a little bit. Boy, it gets busy. There's a lot of instrumentation that comes up and interferes with your voice, and if you're right in the middle of something, you're trying to make your point, a little banjo hits up, or you get a mandolin that hits up, and all of a sudden you're in trouble. They can't hear what you say. So remember, your music, the point I wanted to make here, is that your music can be a distraction. It can be one of your, this one's called Arkansas Traveler on Lamont Records. Other side is Fire on the Mountain. Hoedown. So it can be a distraction, or it can be your greatest ally. And in terms of adding variety to your program, many times you can double the type of variety that you add to your program by keeping a variety of music. That's one of the neat things about having all of the record companies that we have today and all the different bands that we use. I think those of you that use, how many of you have used live music in the last 5 or 6 years at a dance or another? I know we used to use an awful lot of years ago. And the only thing is, you get toward the end of the evening, and unless you have a number of different instruments, or the band is capable of a number of different instruments, you start to miss other bands. You start to miss some of the variety that you could present to your dancers by using different music. So use that to our favor. Use it in your favor. One of the things that I wanted to discuss a little bit about choreography in general, you know, we have a spectrum, as we call. We have something that would start on one side that would be formations that are familiar, arrangements that are familiar, timing that's smooth, few distractions. When you start a dance off, it's nice to start it at this level so the dancers can hear your voice and get used to you. As you change things into the middle of the spectrum a little bit, you might add little diddlies like little tricky get-ins or little tricky get-outs, or a little module or a series of calls that has some a little bit different feel to it or flow to it. It's just spicing up your program a little bit. And as you move into the spectrum on your right or my left, you end up with something that's much more challenging, building calls on top of each other into a concept that I put down on that sheet called choreographic expansion. It's been discussed before, but basically choreographic expansion is a method of calling a movement or a group of movements in a logical order of varying arrangements and or formations to increase variety in programming while ensuring the dancer's success. We've had some incredible masters of choreographic expansion over the years. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Jack Lazary, not only in his calling but in his notes, how he could take a piece of choreography and just expand on it in kind of a logical order and make it work so that the dancers at the end of the sequence were doing things that they would never be able to do at the beginning of the sequence or where he started. Jerry Schatzer was another one that used this to the hilt. He had this little term called "let's dig a little deeper," and he would call a piece of choreography from a standard position, then they'd get him home and say, "let's dig a little bit deeper," and then we'd delve into another aspect or maybe a different arrangement of that choreography, and they'd get back home and let's dig a little deeper, and we'd get right into that in a different way. He was a real master at that. Another one is Bob Byer. He used a little thing called page 1, page 2. He'll get through a sequence and he'll say page 1, and he'll do another kind of arrangement here, and he'll go page 2, and all of a sudden the dancers are involved. The dancers are in this book with him. So it's a method of expanding your choreography, whether using a group of calls or whether using a single call, to make the dancers succeed and they get involved in the success. So I think that we can learn from masters that have used it in the past, and it just takes a little bit of pre-planning, but we can use that to our advantage. I put down this little list of why dancers, and completing this list about why dancers have problems with calls. Catching dancers by surprise is another one that I think that many of us have done before. If you're teaching a workshop or a group of new dancers, for instance, and you have maybe missed a week, you taught them fan the top a couple weeks back and you missed a week. Calling fan the top right off would be a real stickler to them. So to ensure dancer success, they may be promenading home, and a little thing that I call pre-calling comments is say, hey gang, let's work a little fan the top. So they get home and they've already heard fan the top. It's already locked into their brain. It's already easy, as John was saying, to pull that thing out of their long-term memory because you've kind of plugged it into their short-term memory so you can make that work for you. Using lead-in phrases, as we all do. Girls lead Dixie style to an ocean wave. Take a little peek and trade the wave. Those kind of lead phrases really help. If you're dancing from an unfamiliar formation, I think we've all gotten into a position right there where the dancers have not been exposed to a call from a formation. A good one in this situation would be, say, a quarter tag scoot back. You've got your dancers in a quarter tag formation, and you're going to do a scoot back. I think you need to kind of be careful and build the dancers into that. There's a way of building success into that formation if you think about it. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. An arrangement that's unfamiliar. I think we were discussing that early. Red discussed that when your formation or your arrangement is unfamiliar. Instead of 0 lines, you have half lines, and you do a load the boat. Instead of, and we'll discuss a little bit about that as we go along here. If they do not know the call or have forgotten the call, that's another reason too. Another definition that I put in this particular handout was a thing called transfer. In the principle of learning, it allows a dancer or allows one to apply previous knowledge to more quickly learn a new but a similar concept. It's demonstrated when people learn a new but related call more quickly, like they learn weave the ring more quickly than a right and left grand. They learn a left swing through after repeated applications of swing through. So transfer is something that allows us to expand upon what the dancer already knows, and it's just a principle of learning. Success enhancers. The few things that I wrote down here are just a couple of things that we use, and I'm sure most of you use these things all the time, that help you to get your dancers through your choreography. This success enhancers, this directional calling, these helper words. Most of you use helper words. Scoot back in the boy's turn. Scoot back in the girl's turn. Or scoot back, it's a guy and a girl. We use these terms in there. The comment about lead phrases, girls lead Dixie style that we talked about earlier. Identifying and ending formation. You know, boys run, we're dancing lines. And boom, dancers are into a formation that they're familiar with. As John discussed when he was discussing a recycle, if you got that left-handed wave and you've got the girls on the ends and the boys in the center there, boom, you're right back. We've got normal couples, you know, or do it to where we're looking at your corner. If you can do it in such a way to get them in a familiar formation or get them looking at someone that's familiar to them, you're going to have more success. The pre-calling we talked about a little bit just a second ago. Identification of people and arrangements. I think this is really important when you're calling something. A lot of times just a little thing like all the boys are looking in. We've got normal lines, or sashayed lines is a term that I like to use a lot. The dancers just pick up on that, and it assures them that everything's okay. The one concept they talked a little bit about earlier is why can you have four boys in the middle doing a square through 4 hands around? And as was pointed out, because 2 of those people in that 4-dancer setup are dancing the formation, or dancing that call as they always do, and they will help the other 2 through. So I think dancing a familiar formation arrangement for at least half the dancers makes an awful lot of difference. Another thing I think that enhances your success is can't miss completions. When you can have a 0 line, everybody's in sequence and such, and have passed the ocean, do a swing through, and you're going to recycle with the girls on the ends. You recycle, do a right and left grand. If they don't get the recycle, they're going to be close enough to do a right and left grand. And it's a can't miss completion. So you know that you're going to press them a little bit farther, but you're going to give them something, even though they have a little bit of a hard time with the call, they're going to get out right out and be able to succeed. The last thing on that list is compliment and encourage your dancers. There are masters in our business that constantly build up the confidence of their dancers as they call with a little tiny phrases. God, you guys look good. Boy, you're doing okay. You guys are on tonight. Things like this that build up the confidence of your dancers, makes them feel good about what they're doing, whether you're doing something hard or not. I think every once in a while you need to encourage those dancers, and that really makes a difference when you're trying to go through certain sequences of choreography. Red, do we have time to do a quick diddly here? Do we have a square? We have a square of dancers? If we can, it would be terrific. I'd like to use you guys to participate a little bit if you can. We'll have Head couples facing the front and the back of the hall, and the side couples facing each way. Let's say we're gonna do a little thing with recycle. Okay, we've talked a little bit about this before, so it's familiar. Let's just have the heads come into the center and turn and face your corner. Say hi, corner. Step to an ocean wave. It's real easy to do a recycle. Okay, go ahead, dancers, recycle. Step to an ocean wave again. Do a swing through. Okay, let the girls trade in the same ocean wave. Okay, now girls are leading. You can use a lead phrase here. Let's do a recycle. Recycle. You should be looking at your corner here, right? You should be looking at your corner. Give them an ending place to touch base on, right? Touch a quarter. Boys run around the girls. Step to an ocean wave. We got a tidal wave. We got a big long wave, all right? You got a big long wave. Recycle. You're going to be finishing up in lines. We've got normal lines here. We've got normal lines. You guarantee as they're moving through the call, you're going to give them someplace to end up. It feels a lot better for them. Do a right and left through. Let the girls lead and do a Dixie style to an ocean wave. Okay, we got left-handed waves. Let the boys trade in the center. Okay. We've got kind of a new arrangement to a normal arrangement. Let's do a recycle. Girls lead. Recycle. You should be looking at your corner when you're all done. We're all sashayed, but we're looking at our corner. So as you think about, boy, how am I going to present this recycle? How am I going to add something? Sit down and push your checkers around and think. Let's do it in a formation or in a position where I can ensure their success by using some of these success enhancers, and at the same time giving them something that's familiar to them, getting them to a place that's familiar. Do it right and left through. Heads turn and face your partner in the center there and back away, and I think you're home right there. Is that right? Are we home? All right, good. Something like that. Anybody else have any other suggestions on recycle or things you use for recycle? Anybody like to say anything? Okay, something else that you can use to add a little bit more to recycle. Heads past the ocean. All the men extend. Everybody recycle. Centers are facing. Centers will be facing each other. Centers will be facing each other. Yeah. Yeah. Something like this, okay? Step to an ocean wave in the middle, okay? All the men extend to the next girl. All the men extend to the next girl. All the men move up, okay? Everybody recycle. Centers are facing each other. Okay, see, all the men didn't extend, didn't we? Yeah, boy and girl, right? So you have to stop. You have to really say all the men extend and get them to move, and just the men extend. There you go. Okay, that's a good point. My choice of words was maybe not very good there. I could have said just the men extend. Okay, very good. Original men. Okay. Something else that you can do with recycle. Center star through, pass through and do a partner trade, and I think we're home. Sometimes when you're using a call that's not used very much, like cross trail through, there's a way that you can ensure your dancer's success. Say we've just squared up, we've started, I'll turn and say, everybody turn and face your corner. Say, corner, I'm not going to forget you no matter what you do to me. All right? All right, but I know, and I haven't told him yet, but I'm going to use cross trail through here. I'll just say bow to the partner, corners two, and head two couples do a right and left through. Turn the girl. Head two couples cross trail through and go around one. She's your corner. Go around her, make a line. You got her? Move up to the middle and back. Boom. It's the first time you've called that cross trail through, and you've ensured that they'll get there. You're just everything you can to make them get there, okay? Do a right and left through. Turn the girl, slide through, and the centers roll and back away, and I think we're all squared, just like that. So you're ensuring that they're going to get through that thing like that. You can always do from a normal line, we can do a right and left through and cross trail and find the corner, find your corner. You know she's there. You know who she is. You know, you can plead with them and make them succeed in something like that. Something else you can do, you can after you do that with the heads, you can do the same thing with the sides. Make sure the sides are familiar with dancer and with a call. You can have the heads again. Heads go right and left through. Turn the girl. Chain your lady straight across. Head two couples go do a cross trail through, but behind the sides, do a star through. Here comes partner. Behind the sides, star through with your partner. Have the sides move into the middle. Have the sides do something else. Make sure that if you're going to have them do something behind somebody else, that they know who they're going to do it with. And you can ensure that by cueing them to get the right dancer behind. Do a zoom. Close enough. That's right. Do a right and left through in the middle. Veer to the left. And just bend the line and we'll get squared up at home. Another thing you can do is to make sure that they get a can't miss completion. Like, for instance, 4 ladies chain straight across. Head 2 couples cross trail through. Behind the sides, here comes partner, star through with her, while the sides square through 3/4 round. Do an Alamana left. Come back, go right and a left grand. So you can make them sure that they can't miss by making sure that they get there with the right person. Something else that you can do from a cross trail through to a mainstream floor. That. What's that? Oh, promenade. I'm sorry. I forgot about you guys. You shouldn't forget about your floor while you're thinking, okay? Something else you might consider doing. Have the side 2 ladies chain across. Sides cross trail through. Heads move into the middle. Behind the heads to touch 1/4. That's your partner. You're going to touch 1/4. Head couples slide through. And with your partner, touch 1/4. You're in columns, and everybody's got your partner. Everybody shake your partner's hand, right? You got them there. You set it up so that everybody gets to where somebody they're familiar with. Set them up so they get to their corner. But you're ensuring their success by putting them in a position that they know. Single circulate 1 time. Boys run around the girls. No, excuse me. Single circulate 2 times. Now boys run around the girls. Center star through. Pass through partner trade. The other flutter wheel. Sweep 1/4. Do it again. Back away. Okay? Anybody else have some examples of how you expand your choreography with, and we've got a square here, how you might use, why don't you come up and use the microphone, please, because this is on the tape. Okay, have the sides roll away, the head square through. Step to an ocean wave. Okay, 2 boys together, 2 girls together. Do a recycle. Okay? Veer to the left. Wait a second. We veer to the left, we bend the line, we touch 1/4 for the tape. All the boys run around the girls. We've got a 0 double pass through formation. Square through 3 in the center. Alamana left, come back, there you stand. Works nice, comments, and works nice for a singing call. Absolutely. The formation that he had there with the 2 boys together, 2 girls together in an ocean wave is great for a recycle, once again, because you've got 4 or 2 of those dancers out of the 4, or 4 out of your 8, doing it from their what feels to be their normal position. Why don't you come up, use the microphone? It would be terrific. Yeah. Why don't you come up and introduce yourself and use the microphone, because we've got on this on tape. No, absolutely. But we want to share this, and we also want you to do it for the tape.
Let's have the heads step forward and face your corner. Step to an ocean wave, and everybody swing through, and everybody spin the top. Now, very frequently from here, it's a right and left through and square through 3, right? Okay, to vary it a little bit, let's have everybody hinge. Let's have all the girls turn around. Element left. And then if you use on a singing call and you run out a little time, you can do this. Let's have the head step forward and face your corner. Step to an ocean wave, swing through, spin the top, have everybody hinge. Girls turn around. You see, maybe you need an extra second or 2. Everybody pass through. Everybody stop. Everybody to U-turn back and element left and come back square sets. You can use up a extra beat or 2. You can use up an extra beat or 2 by, if you see your head a little bit, you got fast dancers or slow, you can pass through and do a U-turn back.
Absolutely. That comment from one of the dancers was that some get a half an Alaman, some get a whole Alaman. As long as you got some Alaman, you're doing all right, right? Yeah. Right. Listen, let's thank our square for being here. Red?
Okay, thank you very much. We're kind of running out of time here, but what you've been seeing is probably one of the most important things that a caller can have, which will ensure his success as a caller. And all of you want to be successful as callers, or you wouldn't be in the business. And that's primary. If you don't know and not aware of the formations and what they do and the arrangement of dancers and what can happen with them, you should do a little bit of studying and work at it a little bit. A lot of good callers sort of come by this naturally through the years they have. They've known this thing, but they haven't really looked at it too closely. We're looking at things a lot more closely today in this business than we used to, and finding out that what the guys that you know as successful callers do automatically is something that you can learn to do. It's not something that is beyond you, and you can improve your calling tremendously if you will do a little work at it. So we hope that this session and the one before it would be important to you. If you don't have the tape of the one that preceded this KISS, no, you're not paying attention. That's right. I suggest you get that tape as well. I don't know if any of you were here this morning. Some of you were, I know, because I was sitting in on that session. And also this tape, it'll kind of tie in together, this whole idea that we want to get across to you. If your dancers are having trouble dancing to you, there may be a good reason why. And you may be able to improve that. We all want to challenge the dancer a little bit, to bring them up to a point where they're having, they have to think a little bit and they have to, but we don't want to go beyond that point. And that is at any level. They want to be successful. They really do want to be successful. I've known callers who are very capable callers, but they didn't have that good judgment. They didn't know how to, and they just were not successful. Many of them now out of business because they didn't learn these things. So we hope that today has been something that's important to you, and I want to thank our panelists, John Sybalsky and Mike Seastrom. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the convention.